All right, Israel Collective, thank you for logging on to a very special Zoomcast. As you can see, this is a little bit different than our usual ones in that I can't see you, if you can see us. It's more of a webinar. That's because we have an incredible guest that's going to share some incredible stuff with us. On some of the first Israel Collective trips, we didn't necessarily have the time to go to all the places we wanted to, but when we started going to the place called the City of David, light bulbs went off. My eyes were wide open. I know a lot of people in this chat right now are apologists, academics who love to give a defense for the faith that they profess. And no place is that more apparent than the City of David. So when our guest is showing our teams around and is pointing, this is this, you just see, the City of David is just one big the entire time. But some of you I know actually haven't even been there, and some of you just got back from there in the past few months. So we have a wide range of folks on this trip, on this call. But now I want to introduce you to Ze'ev Orenstein, the Director of International Affairs at the City of David, the legend himself, who's going to take it from here. And I will be back at the end for questions and answers. But there's no person in the world I'd rather hear from right now than my man, Ze'ev Orenstein. I'll let you take it away, bud.
So it is definitely an honor to be here, and certainly more exciting to be talking to you guys than talking about all the other things going on in the world right now. Now, some of you know me. I know some of you. Some of you we have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, but we all know, and you all know Jerusalem. And that is the most important thing. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And when we speak about Jerusalem, I am going to show you here. We'll do a share screen. And when we talk about Jerusalem, oftentimes people think that we're actually talking about somewhere else. So where are we talking about when we talk about Jerusalem? So this is the Jerusalem that I imagine most of you are familiar with. You have, if you can see my mouse over here, you got the Western Wall right over here. This is the Temple Mount, the Old City, Church of the Holy Sepulchre over here to the left, the Garden Tomb above it, Garden of Gethsemane over here to the right, the Mount of Olives, and just to the south, outside the Old City walls, is the City of David, right? Now, up until 150 years ago, I know this is a review for some of you, everyone thought that the original city of Jerusalem was up here in the Old City. It turns out that it's really down here, but it was a lost city up until a little more than a century ago, because this is what it used to look like. There was nothing here. Everyone thought that the biblical city of Jerusalem, this book here, the Bible, this is the original. This is the Hebrew Bible. Everything, almost everything, the vast majority of the references to Jerusalem in this book. We're talking about King David, King Solomon, King Hezekiah, prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah. They're hanging out largely in the City of David, the Temple Mount area. There was no old city yet in the Bible. Just to give you a little bit of context, when we speak of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, that ends close to 350 to 400 years before Jesus, right? So just gives you a little bit of context. When Jesus is walking around in Jerusalem, that's 400 years after the Hebrew Bible finishes. So we're talking about biblical Jerusalem, the Hebrew Bible. That is the City of David. Now, this has been a challenging time. And by the way, if I say anything at any point that doesn't make sense, you have questions, Raj is monitoring the chat box, the Q&A box. So feel free to ask whatever you want, and he'll let me know, and happy to elaborate if anything doesn't make sense or you have any questions. So I want to share with you a story of something that was not found but returned just a couple of weeks ago before we went into lockdown here. I've been working from home for about the last 3 weeks. It's been an interesting time. It's also been a blessing to be with my family. It's one of those things that you reap what you sow, and we're pleasantly surprised to see that we actually all really love each other and get along with each other. And we've, aside from a couple of little blow-ups here and there, we're surprisingly getting along, which is great. Now, what do we have? We have, if you take a look at this, you have a large stone. Now, I want to throw this out to you. What is this? I will give you 3 options. We'll do a little bit of multiple choice, make this a little bit interactive. This was returned to us a couple of weeks ago. There is a backstory to this, which is connected to the coronavirus. So what happens here? Goes like this. About 15 years ago, there was a high school that came for a tour of the City of David. In one of the excavations, there was a display of ancient artifacts, among them this large stone that you see here. So before I tell you what happens, I'm going to give you 3 options, and as I'm telling the story, feel free to punch in what you think the correct answer is. Option number 1 is that this is the type of stone similar to the one that David would have used when he slew the giant Goliath, a large giant sling stone, right? That's option number 1. Option number 2 is that it is a weight that was used in the temple service, okay? A stone weight that was used in the temple, atop the Temple Mount. And option number 3 is it is a Roman catapult stone. So again, option number 1 is it's the type of stone that was used, the likes of which would have been used by King David to kill Goliath. Number 2, it was a weight from the temple in Jerusalem. Number 3, it was a Roman catapult stone. So those are the 3 options. You can type into the chat box 1, 2, or 3. And while you're doing that, Raj, you'll let me know at the end of the story what the consensus is. So you have this high school group. They come to the city of David, and there's this whole table of antiquities that are on display. Antiquities is a fancy word for old stuff. And one of them says, "Wouldn't it be funny if I just took that home with me?" And apparently no one's looking. He opens up his backpack, puts this stone inside, and he leaves. 15 years go by. He is now older, figure pushing probably close to 30. And now he's married, has kids, and like the rest of the country, he's pretty much stuck at home right now. And as he's cleaning for Passover, which is tomorrow night, he comes across this ancient stone, and he says, "Oh my God, I forgot all about this. I still have this thing, and I don't want God to cast his wrath upon me and my family. I need to get this out of my house. I need to repent. I need to return this to its rightful owners so that God will have mercy on me and my family. Forgive the pun, but I need to cast off this burden that's been weighing me down." And, you know, he was afraid to return it himself. And so what does he do? He gives it to one of his friends, says, "Hey, I need you to return this for me anonymously. Don't let them know that I'm the one who stole it, but I need to give this back." And so he gives it back, and we get it. And I got to, on my last day of somewhat freedom, I got to hold it. And so now let's come back to the question. What is this? Again, option number 1, it's the type of stone that King David would have used to kill the giant Goliath. Number 2, it is a weight that was used in the temple. Number 3, it is a Roman catapult stone. Now this thing weighs about 10 pounds. Raj, do we have any consensus on answers here?
Let's see. We have Matt says it's a projectile. Carrie says it's a catapult stone. George says option 2, and Ashley says option 1.
Wow, it's not so much consensus. So the reality is this is number 3. This is a 2,000-year-old Roman catapult stone. So if you think of the year 70 CE, when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, they would have put one of those into something that looks like this, and they would have thrown it against the walls of Jerusalem. They would have shot it against the temple atop the Temple Mount. This is an ancient artifact that, again, when you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life. Here is, you could literally, I held it in my own hand, ancient remnant of the destruction of Jerusalem from 2,000 years ago. It's not simply a matter of faith. It's a matter of fact. And something that I always take some measure of comfort in is, you know, we may have Roman catapult stones still today in Jerusalem, and you can go to Rome, and I wouldn't recommend it right now, but you can go to Rome and see the Arch of Titus and all these other things, but the great Roman Empire is gone. But Jerusalem is still here, right? So we could talk about 2,000-year-old Roman things, but we are very, very much still alive, still here, and our heritage is still, you know, as here as it was thousands of years ago. So now one other discovery that is somewhat related to this time. You have over here, most of us, at least the ones who are on tour with me, who visited the city of David, and probably even those who weren't, you visited an excavation that is believed to have been the palace of King David. Here's a rendering of it over here. Now, along the slope over here, just below, is a retaining wall. Now, this wall would have kept the palace up on top over here. And along this retaining wall, they found ancient homes of government officials, ministers who would have been living next to the king. And they found an interesting stone. Now, does anyone have any guesses what this stone is? All I will tell you is it relates to hygiene. Any guesses? 2,500-year-old stone, square stone, hole in the middle. give you about 10 seconds to come up with any clever answers. And then even this stone here, you'll see, shows that when you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life. And it also tells us about the importance of hygiene, which is really important today as well. Raj, you got any answers for what this is?
Yeah, the only one I can say that's appropriate is toilet.
Well, there you go. I'm not sure what the others are, but they're probably along those lines. This is one of the oldest toilets in the world that we have here. It's a 2,500-year-old toilet. Now, we have an ancient tradition that says, who is rich? One who has a toilet next to their table. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the big deal about having a toilet next to your table? But if you go back to Jerusalem 2,500 years ago, and you have to go to the bathroom, you know what you were doing? You were going out with everyone else and maybe digging a hole in the ground and just doing your thing. But if you were wealthy, you had a toilet right next to your home. You had your own toilet. That was a big, big deal back in the day. So wherever you're holed up right now, the fact that you have your own toilet, don't take that for granted, because not everyone in the world today has it, and certainly in ancient times they didn't have it. But here is a toilet that belonged to some royal family, some government official. Now, scientists, they're funny people. And so they decide they want to know what was the diet of the last people to use this toilet. So they lift up this stone, they scoop out some of the earth that was beneath it, inside the hole over there, they scoop out some of the earth, and they test it. And it comes back with the results saying that the last people to use this toilet were suffering from tapeworm. They had some virus, some tapeworm that you get from eating raw meat, and also they were eating weeds. So the diet of the last people to use this toilet 2,500 years ago, end of First Temple period Jerusalem, is raw meat and weeds. And they couldn't understand, why would people eat raw meat and weeds? Except if you look in this book, 2,500 years ago, the Babylonians are destroying Jerusalem. Now, before they destroy Jerusalem, what do? They besiege it, right? No one can get in, no one can get out. And eventually the supply of wood that was in Jerusalem is exhausted. And now you can't cook your meat anymore, but you still got to eat. And so people start eating raw meat, and they start eating grass and weeds, because that was all that there was. And eventually the Babylonians destroy Jerusalem, and 2,500 years go by until some scientists come and see that the diet of these people, raw meat and weeds, when you eat raw meat, you get tapeworm. And even from an ancient toilet in the city of David, the place where Jerusalem began, the biblical site of Jerusalem, even an ancient toilet proves the truth of the Bible, that when you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life. And it also reaffirms what everyone knows very well today, the importance of hygiene, right? So stay healthy, everybody. Now, what we're going to do, this next part is going to be a little bit of a review for some of you, and something very new and significant for the rest of you. So let's go back to 2,000 years ago. Something very, very important exists in Jerusalem, and that begins to be discovered in 2004. 2004, at the southern end of the city of David, if you look towards the bottom of the screen where my mouse is over here, there is a road. Beneath the road, there is a drainage pipe. So again, just to orient us, up here, Temple Mount, over here, Western Wall, Old City. The Old City walls are about 450 years old. City of David goes back about 4,000 years. King David is 3,000 years ago. Jesus is 2,000 years ago, just to orient us. So now we're talking about 2004, and you have a road over here. Beneath the road, there is a sewage pipe, and in 2004, the sewage pipe explodes. And you have a big mess, and construction crews from the Jerusalem municipality have to come and repair the sewage pipe. Except in Jerusalem, it's not just any municipality. And so when a sewage pipe bursts in Jerusalem, you don't only send in construction crews, you also have to send in archaeologists. And so the archaeologists are supervising. They hear scraping, scratching, and it doesn't sound right. They clear everyone out, and it turns out that they had uncovered these ancient stone steps, 2,000 years old. And they say there's only one other place in the country with steps just like these, and these are the steps over here, which may look familiar. I'm sure probably all of your groups have visited these steps. These are the steps leading up to the southern ascent of the Temple Mount. We're talking about the steps over here that would have led into the temple 2,000 years ago. So then the question was, if we know what these steps are here, what are the steps down here? And they realized that they had discovered the steps leading down to the ancient Pool of Siloam. Now the Pool of Siloam, I don't have to tell you, in terms of the Christian scriptures, has deep significance. In the Christian scriptures, in terms of the story of the healing of the blind man, and in terms of the Bible when it speaks of 3 times a year, the pilgrimage festivals, Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles, when everyone has to go up to the temple. Before you can go up to the temple, the Bible tells us you have to cleanse yourself. Now, the historian Josephus says that you would have had 2,000 years ago close to 3 million people who would be going up to the temple, up here, to the temple on the Temple Mount, right over here. So the question was, if you have millions of people who have to get up to here and they have to purify themselves, this was the Pool of Siloam down over here at the bottom of the screen. It was the size of 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools, big enough to accommodate the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So then the question became, if we know where the pool is and we know where the temple stood on the Temple Mount, how did everyone get from here up to here? So they widen the excavation, and what they find is this. This is the actual pilgrimage road. This is the road that our ancestors, yours and mine, 2,000 years ago walked on when they went on pilgrimage from the pool down here all the way up to the temple on the Temple Mount. Now, this road is being literally excavated as we speak. Well, let me correct that. Generally speaking, it is being excavated as we speak. Right now, sadly, not much is happening. But up until a couple of weeks ago, it was being excavated, and God willing, may it be very, very soon, it will be excavated again. But this, it's not a road near here, not stones like these, but this is the actual pilgrimage road itself. The road itself is about 5-6 times wider than what you could see over here. So imagine you have millions of people who are going up on a road 5-6 times as wide as what you see here, walking all the way up on these actual stones. Now they would pass along the way something that looks like this. Now, for those of you who were not with me along this road, for those of you who already know what it is, hold off. But this is the only one of its kind found in Jerusalem. It's found along the pilgrimage road in the city of David. Now, anyone have a sense of what this might be? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. And while you're coming up with your answers, I'll just say this today is about 60 feet underground. The modern day city of David is above our heads. So you have the streets, the homes, the cars, they're all 60 feet above this. This is going on below. We're trying to combine the best of both worlds, which is preserve the modern while uncovering the ancient. And in a couple of years' time, people of all faiths and backgrounds will be able to literally walk in the footsteps of the Bible. Now, Raj, we got any answers what this is?
Not yet. Anyone have a guess as to what that is?
So you have today, for those of you who are watching it, you have these like daily press briefings where the president gets up, or if you're in New York, Governor Cuomo gets up, and they all give their speeches and everyone's watching it. Now, ancient times, you didn't have Fox News or CNN or whoever to cover these big press briefings. And so what would you do? You'd go out to where the people are. You'd go to the town square and you would speak. And if you were interesting, people would stop and listen. So this is the ancient original speaker's corner, a soapbox. This is a podium, the only one of its kind found so far in Jerusalem. It's found along the pilgrimage road. You could imagine the likes of whom 2,000 years ago, who would have had something that they wanted to share with the masses. This is where they're going to do it from, because you have millions of people who are going down to the pool, up to the Temple Mount. The length of the road is about half a mile. And I could tell you, and anyone listening here is welcome to chime in on this point. I do not believe you will find anywhere in the world a half mile with more significance to more people than this half mile here of the pilgrimage road in the city of David, which runs from the Pool of Siloam all the way up through the city of David, coming out by the footsteps of the Temple Mount, of the Western Wall, of the Southern Steps. This has significance to billions and billions of people. I do not believe there is a more significant half mile anywhere in the world. Some of you have been able to walk on this road, the portion that we've excavated so far, which is not yet open to the public, but for Israel Collective, we open the doors and give all access. Some of you have walked it. Some of you, God willing, when you come back, we'll walk it together. But in a couple of years' time, you will literally be able to walk in the footsteps of the Bible. Now, if you think in the Bible, you have in the Psalms, you have about 10 Psalms or so, which are called the Songs of Ascent. Now, why are they called Songs of Ascent? Now, you can say, okay, because they're really holy. Maybe you're getting spiritually high when you say these songs of ascent. Of course, yes, they're all very holy. But why are they called the songs of ascent? I will give you a very simple answer. Do you know when you were saying those songs of ascent? You were singing those songs of ascent as you were ascending to the temple. You were coming up from the Pool of Siloam, up along the pilgrimage road through the city of David, going uphill for a half mile, and along that half mile, you're singing the songs of ascent. When you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life. This is a road that, God willing, you'll all be able to walk on. You could see it, you could touch it, you could walk on it. It's real. And I want to tell you, I'm biased, but when you think of the wonders of the world, you think of the Colosseum in Rome, the pyramids in Egypt, which again, Passover is coming up. But I actually think not only does the pilgrimage road belong in the same category as those, I actually think this discovery of the pilgrimage road and the Pool of Siloam are even more significant than those two wonders of the world, and I'll tell you why. If you've been to Egypt, and maybe some of the people on this call have been to Egypt and seen the pyramids, the ancient Egypt that built the pyramids is long gone. In fact, if anyone built the pyramids, it was probably the Jews. But, Egypt is long gone. If you go to Rome and you go to the great, the Colosseum, right? The great Roman Empire that built the Colosseum, gone. So you could go to the pyramids, you can go to the Colosseum and say, okay, great, that's interesting. Once upon a time, there was a great Roman Empire. Once upon a time, there was this Egypt. But they're gone. And yet, when you come to Jerusalem, when you come to the city of David, when you walk along the pilgrimage road, this is not just a piece of history. This is the continuation of a story. My story, your story, our story. It's not once upon a time there was a place called Jerusalem. Once upon a time there was people called the Jews. Once upon a time there were Christians. It's the same road walked by our ancestors, yours and mine, 2,000 years ago when they went on pilgrimage in the same Jerusalem to the temple that stood on the same Temple Mount. The Pool of Siloam is 100% the same Pool of Siloam from 2,000 years ago. The pilgrimage road is the same pilgrimage road that was used 2,000 years ago. The Temple Mount is the same Temple Mount from 2,000 years ago. And those of you who have walked it, you're lucky. Those of you who haven't yet walked it, you will soon. But pretty soon, you're going to have billions of people who will be able to walk in the footsteps of their ancestors, and just to be able to walk on the continuation of your heritage, of your history. And how many places in the world can a person go and say that they literally get to walk in the footsteps of their ancestors going back thousands of years, doing the same exact thing that they were doing thousands of years ago? It's the same heritage. It's the same faith. It's the same God. And it's happening now. It's, you don't get that in Rome. You don't get that in Egypt. You don't get that in Athens, but you get it in Jerusalem. And that's your history too. And God willing, I'm looking forward to sharing more of it with you for those of you who haven't seen this yet. And I'll show you over here. If you look right over here, you could see this is a coin. It's a 2,000-year-old coin that was embedded into the road, melted into the road when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. I have an identical one to it right over here, 2,000 years old. And this coin was minted during the Great Jewish Revolt for freedom against the Roman occupation of Jerusalem. And on this coin, it says, for the freedom of Zion, Zion being another name for Jerusalem. And scholars have long wondered, why were the Jews minting these coins at that time? Because at that time, everyone knew the Romans were going to destroy Jerusalem. So why waste your energies minting a worthless currency? And I heard an answer, and the answer that I heard, I think, has a lot of relevance to what's going on right now in the world as well, which is the Jews understood that even though the Romans may destroy Jerusalem, they believed that one day in the future, the descendants would return to Jerusalem and find these coins and know what their ancestors lived and died for a free Jerusalem. They probably thought it would take a couple of decades, a couple of years. They couldn't imagine it would be nearly 2,000 years before the Jewish people returned as sovereign to Jerusalem. But eventually we did, and here we are, right? And so I'll end with something that I've been thinking about a lot of late. I'll give a book recommendation. If you've never read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, highly, highly recommend. And since most of us are probably stuck at home anyway, you should get it. There's an Audible version of it. There's a Kindle version of it. He was in the Holocaust. Imagine if you guys know Irving Roth. Think of someone like Irving Roth. He's in the Holocaust. He survives the Holocaust. He's a psychologist. And one of the things that he speaks about in the book, among many, many important lessons, I'll share one. He says that in life, many of the things that happen to us, we have very little control over. However, we have full control over how we respond to what happens to us in life. So he said, even in the Holocaust, where the Jews in the concentration camps, they had no freedom. But he said you still had the ability to choose how you were going to live and how you were going to die. Would you live with dignity? Would you die with dignity? Or would you allow the Nazis to take that away from you also? And he said that you had the opportunity to maybe share an encouraging word with someone next to you who was giving up hope. Maybe share a piece of bread with somebody. Or there were those who took someone's piece of bread or didn't care about if they saw someone else who was suffering. So that's a choice. Now, I imagine most of us on this call here are not going to be the ones to come up with a cure for coronavirus. And so we're kind of helpless, waiting at home for the governments and doctors to figure things out. And so what can we be doing at this time? And I think we have to have that bigger picture perspective, like the people minted this coin here, like Viktor Frankl did, and say, okay, I may not be able to control what's happening to me, but I can control how I'm going to respond to it and how I'm going to relate to it. And, it's an opportunity for all of us to think about how we can come out of whatever is happening right now, which is historic in nature, maybe even in a certain sense biblical, in terms of the magnitude of what's happening here. And how can we come out of it as better people, better spouses, better parents, better people of faith, better community members, and how can we be, when we look back on this, how can we make sure that we look back and say, this time brought out the best of me, brought out the best of my family, brought out the best of my community, brought out the best of the people of faith, so that, collectively we could all look back and say, wow, we're actually in a better place. Not that this is a good thing that it happened, but that's the whole point. It's happening anyway. And so how can we try to turn this difficult time into something that at some point, hopefully not too long from now, we'll be able to look back and say it actually helped us get to a better place. On that note, I think I will open it up for questions that anyone might have, and we'll go from there.
Wow, Ze'ev, thank you so much. Hey, if this whole City of David, Indiana Jones thing doesn't work out, you can just be a preacher, because, I'll come, man. That was amazing. Such a word of encouragement. Yeah, we do have some questions. So
Great.
But yeah, Ze'ev, you are a godsend. It's so amazing to have you. All right, let's get to some of these questions for Ze'ev. If you have more questions, just type it in the little chat box, and we'll get the expert, the global expert on this specific subject to answer. All right, Carrie asks, is there any indication that there was a divider to keep those who had been ritually immersed in Siloam from coming into contact with those who had not? I am thinking about the dividers we see on the steps with Mikvaot, for example, at Qumran.
Okay, so certainly in the Pool of Siloam, there would have been some type of division, not just to separate between the pure and the impure, but both men and women would have to purify themselves before going up to the temple. And if you've read the Bible, you know that God does not advocate skinny dipping. And therefore, meaning, and I'll tell you the other part of that is when former Energy Secretary Rick Perry, when he visited the City of David back in August, we're in the Pool of Siloam, and he says, this is the Pool of Siloam. This is where Jesus healed the blind man. I'm like, yeah, of course. He goes down into ground level of the pool. There's no water in it today. And he bends down and makes it look like he's bathing. And I said to him, Secretary, I said, you're lucky that you're Christian. He says, why is that? I said, well, because when Jews go and immerse ourselves, we take off all our clothes first, right? So there would have been no way thousands of years ago when the temple is standing that you have men and women all getting naked in front of each other. It's just not biblical in that sense. So there would have been dividers. It's believed probably along the road itself. Also, whether there would have been physical dividers or whether it would be understood that those going down to the pool would have been on maybe the right side of the road and those going up to the temple on the left side, because yes, you can't have contact. If you've purified yourself, you can't come into contact with someone who is not pure. So we have not found the physical dividers. Keep in mind, if they had dividers back then, they probably would have been wooden, which means they probably wouldn't have lasted all these thousands of years. but almost certainly there would have been some form of separation along the pilgrimage road and perhaps in the pool itself to separate the people.
Awesome, awesome. Any other questions? Let's see here. Yeah, I actually have some people typing. For those who are watching, because you're watching, Ze'ev has a lot more to share that he could share at another time. So we'll definitely be doing this again. In fact, he was asking me before we started, hey, should we talk about that thing we talked about a couple months ago about David's altar? I'll leave it at that. So all that to be said, there is a lot more he can talk about, and we will be having him back for future talks. Let's see. How many people have been able to walk the pilgrimage road since it's opened?
Well, it's actually not open. It's still very much a closed site. So we're talking about not so many people. Maybe like here and there, a couple of hundred, that have come through. We're not talking about thousands and tens of thousands. It's still an active excavation site. Probably it will not be fully open to the public for another, I'm guessing, assuming this passes relatively soon, probably another 3-4 years. You'll be able to come and literally walk the pilgrimage road. But again, if you come with Israel Collective and Kufi, we'll get you there before. But it will not be open for the public for a couple of years still, because if we open it to the public, we can't dig. And if we can't dig, we can't uncover the whole road. I will tell you this, though. You have those at the United Nations and some Palestinian leadership who choose to deny the Jewish and Christian heritage in Jerusalem. And I can tell you they're not fans of the pilgrimage road. When we had a big ceremony with some leaders from the U.S. administration this past June, the Palestinians and UN didn't like it because from their perspective, the Jewish and Christian heritage in Jerusalem is fake news. The city of David is very inconvenient because every day we're unearthing antiquities that are showing not simply as a matter of faith, but as a matter of fact, the connection that we share to Jerusalem, that it's real. You can see it, you can touch it. The Bible comes to life. And for many people, everyone on this call, I'm sure it's something that is super exciting for you. There are those who find it to be very threatening, sadly. But we're going to keep going.
Joe just said you actually answered his question about there being political backlash for finding this road. And I think that's something that I just want to chime in real fast. And it's something that sounds obvious, but I think it's worth encouraging people definitely in this season. It's all true. And I know that sounds so basic, but that's what I love about your presentation, Ze'ev. It's all true. And then we can, if it's all true, then all the promises are true. It's to be able to see the God, as one of our participants, Luke, said, to be able to see God exercise his faithfulness is something truly amazing. All right, a couple more questions and then we'll get this. Let's see. Okay. We've been following our guide Yoav's Instagram story about how the church won't let the city of David excavate the other side of the pool. Any progress on that?
All I'll say is that I'm very optimistic that things will work themselves out sooner rather than later.
Awesome. All right, we'll wrap this up with just one more question. Martha asks, what is Easter Sunday, and for that matter, Passover, going to look like in Israel now that everyone is quarantined?
Officially, if you follow, I don't know if you go to Jerusalem Post or anything, you can read all about the updated restrictions. But the country, I actually think as of already for the last hour and a half, is on lockdown, I think through Friday or Saturday. You literally can't leave. I mean, if you need to get food or medicine, but even supermarkets are closing tomorrow until Saturday, I think. They want us home. And not only do they want us home, to paint a picture, Passover is a major festival for us, not just biblically, but communally. You do the Passover Seder, the Passover dinner with friends, with family, extended family. And because the virus is spread so easily, and certainly among the elderly, we're not allowed to do that this year. So just to paint a real picture for you, my parents live in Israel. They're divorced. And that means my mother will be doing Passover Seder alone. My father will be doing Passover Seder alone. My wife's father will be doing Passover Seder alone. And again, since we're observant, that means we can't like do a FaceTime or a Zoom call with them, meaning once the Sabbath or festival starts, there's no computers, there's no cell phones, there's nothing, which means we're going to be doing it. We were supposed to have about 15, 20 people for our Seder. We're going to be having it, my wife and 3 kids. And again, my parents, each of them individually is on their own. And so it's sad in that sense. It's sad. But at the same time, assuming this passes soon and that we all move on from it in a positive way, again, doesn't minimize those who have gotten sick and who are dying from this. But when we do move on from this, this will be a Passover that we're going to talk about, assuming next year we go back to somewhat normal. If any of you have seen the 10 Commandments, I mean, this is like the biblical Passover, where literally you're in your home, you have the lamb's blood on the doorposts, and it says, don't go outside. There is a plague outside, and God's going to hopefully pass over our homes, and we'll come out, liberated on the other side of this. And again, not to say that those who are getting sick, God doesn't love. I mean, it's a complicated theological thing. It's not to say that, but the idea is hopefully by everyone staying home, not going out, that God will pass over our homes, that the plague will pass over, and hopefully it'll pass over all of our homes, Jews, Gentiles, Christians, everybody. Hopefully there'll be a liberation, a universal liberation for everyone to come out of this. It says in Psalms, it says, those who you plant with tears and you reap with joy. So this is a time of, some planting with tears, but hopefully out of it comes some joy, maybe closer family bonding, maybe it's a time for spiritual introspection. What does God want from us individually? What does God want from the world? How can we be vessels and messengers and agents to bring that to reality in a way that people will receive it? It's a lot of good that we can be doing right now while we're stuck at home. It's just a matter of trying to be intentional about making that happen.
Wow. Ze'ev, you are gifted, to say the least, my friend. We're going to leave it here. I was going to kind of wrap it up, but I actually think we have a question that I think is a perfect way to end it. So when you're done answering this question, I'll just end this whole thing. Okay. The last question is so everyone on this call, well, most everyone on this call are prayer people of prayer. How can we be praying for you? How can we be praying for Israel? How can we be praying for Jerusalem, the city of David? How can the people on this call be in prayer for you guys?
I'll tell you a prayer that something I've been thinking about. Sometimes I feel a bit presumptuous when I pray for something specific. I'll give you an example. Let's say a person is applying for a job, and you pray, God, please, help me get this job. And there's a part of it that says, well, maybe God doesn't want you to get this job. And it's like presumptuous, like, to say, well, God, I know what's right and what's good, and therefore make this happen. To say, well, God, please, if this is what you want for me, then let me get the job. If you have a different path for me, then whatever that is, help me find that path. And so here, what I've been thinking about is instinctively, it's like, God, just make this plague end. And for sure, I mean, that there's no question. But what I've been praying for personally is, God, whatever it is that you're trying to teach us and teach the world, please do it as painlessly as possibly, because there are a lot of people hurting right now. And it's, as a person of faith, there is something we're meant to learn from this. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm sure there are people who are smarter than me and holier than me who have a better idea. I don't know what it is. But if there's a way for God to bring that awareness to us with less people being sick and less people dying, and that we can get the same impact, then God, please do that. Because I can tell you, City of David, just to make it very, very real, I'm still getting paid right now, thank God. But I'm among the few. The City of David is an archaeological site. It's a tourist site. There are no tourists in Israel today. There's no archaeology going on in Israel today. Most of my work, I travel to the US, I'm meeting with people. I can't travel. No one can come here. I would say the majority of employees in the City of David are put on unpaid leave right now. Probably about 25% of the country. I know the US is a big issue as well. A lot of people are hurting. Health-wise, they're hurting. Economically, people are hurting. But Israel, a big percentage of our economy is tourism based. That means, El Al is saying they might go under. The hotels, they're in big trouble. All the tour guides, like Yoav, who you guys mentioned, he doesn't have income right now, and unless he has savings, I mean, he's not like a salaried worker that the government will give you unemployment. I mean, tour guides are kind of like private contractors, which means you don't have a regular salary. So these are all people who are hurting in a real way. And again, that the only thing I would say is just that whatever God wants us to learn from this, let it come in as painless and speedy a way as possible, so that people don't need to be hurt any more than absolutely necessary in order for God to accomplish whatever it is that he is trying to accomplish with this. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know how profound that is, but that's what I got.
Well, amen. And thank you, Ze'ev. We really, truly, truly appreciate you taking this time with us, and we'll be praying that the Prince of Peace is near you, and that you feel his presence. So again, thank you for everyone for joining us, and thank you, Ze'ev, for being part of this call. We love you.
Thanks for having me.